War. It's a concept so chilling that it freezes the human spirit. In the vast theater of conflict, life isn't cherished, it's simply counted. One's existence, their dreams, their sorrows, are reduced to a mere tick mark, an addition or subtraction in a ledger of death. While poring over the archives of the Korean conflict, I found no roll call of brave souls, no chronicle of valiant spirits. Instead, there was a number, 271,300, just a shade shy of 300,000 lives obliterated, evaporating like morning dew under the sun of a conflict that never truly illuminated its purpose. Then there were the others, 227,800 fallen, and 44,000 souls adrift, marked as missing from the Korean side. Their losses were over quadruple those of the Americans. It's curious how the tally for the missing often came rounded to the nearest hundred, as if the souls lost were mere approximations, insignificant rounding errors in the grand arithmetic of war. My mind would often wander back to the eerie silhouettes in the forest, faces I once knew now veiled in death's shadow. It's haunting to think that perhaps their numbers should be even greater. Don't mistake me. I'm not attempting to paint my role in the war in a heroic hue, nor claim that our cause was righteous. But I fought. I fought for my country, my homeland. At a mere 20 years of age, with fire in my heart and rebellion in my spirit, I joined the Korean People's Army. My mother's eyes, filled with anguish and disapproval, did little to dissuade me. Memories of my father, a brutish man whose cruelty was a force of nature, spurred me on. Recollections of him humiliating me before his friends or the unspeakable acts he committed in drunken stupors still scar my soul. But let's not dwell there. Those shadows of my past were enough to send me seeking solace in the battlefield. The specifics of my training matter little. The grueling days and sleepless nights could mirror any soldier's tale. But in a twist of fate, 7 months from my enlistment, I found myself a part of the 2nd Division of the Ground Forces, nestled within the 14th Infantry Regiment's 3rd Section. A chapter of history that, curiously enough, seemed to have vanished from the annals of time after the war's end. Why? Maybe we weren't noteworthy enough. Perhaps our deeds or misdeeds were too controversial for the post-war world. Or, most hauntingly, maybe it was tied to that fateful mission in March 1951. The world was waking from winter's grass. Vivid emerald leaves were tentatively reaching for the sun. We called ourselves the Fury Squad, 7 souls bound by fate. Our sergeant, known only as Yi, was a paradox wrapped in a uniform. He radiated the icy authority of a seasoned warrior, striking a balance between reverence and fear in our hearts. He was an enigma, his past a mystery, his intentions ever inscrutable. And in our ranks was Young-woo, a man who wore 2 faces. Off the battlefield, he was the life of the party, his words flowing like a bubbling brook. But once he was in the line of fire, a veil of solemnity draped him, turning him into a force to be reckoned with. Lastly, there was Unda, the youngest of our band. The weight of a reluctant enlistment, forced upon him by a demanding father, rested heavily on his slender shoulders. Seeing a shadow of my own past in him, I pledged to guide him through the storm we had found ourselves in. In the tapestry of our group, the threads of past connections came to light. Jum-wook and Ashoka were not strangers to each other. They shared memories dating back to their elementary school days. Those two, twins with a bond that was palpable, were just a year my senior. Their pasts seemed so distant and unrelated to our current predicament that I hardly gave it a second thought. Another enigma among us was Taya, son of a respected sergeant. His presence among us was like a delicate rose amidst thorns. I had initially braced myself for the tales of his father's valor. After all, his lineage was rumored to be filled with acts of heroism too numerous to remember. Yet throughout our time together, he kept the stories of his father shrouded in silence. It was a silence that, in some moments, felt heavy, filled with both reverence and regret. The war-torn landscape told tales of devastation. The roaring explosions and the constant rain of bullets painted a terrifying canvas. As we held our ground, young Wook estimated that our battalion had already lost about 120 men. Gripping our T-99 rifles till our palms ached, we watched as the setting sun cast long shadows across the scene of destruction. Then, amid the ear-splitting din, Sergeant Yi's voice cut through. "Break off. Fall back." His order confounded us. Why were we retreating when our battalion was so direly outnumbered? Yet the gravity in his voice, the unspoken threat of defying him, spurred us into action. With our gear hastily thrown together, we navigated the treacherous, muck-laden terrain. All of us, that is, except for young Wook, who remained immersed in his sniper's duty. The world around us had become so chaotic that we even found ourselves communicating in English, a language we had honed to intercept American communications. "Come on, young. Move," I screamed over the relentless barrage. As if on cue, he turned, only to be met with 2 bullets that pierced his pelvis. The unexpected assault caught us off guard, and as young Wook crumbled backward, the sharp contrast of his lifeblood against the muddy ground was seared into our memories. Panic ensued. Asuka and Chol-Su, driven by camaraderie, rushed to young Wook's aid, trying desperately to lift him. Taeya's eyes, normally filled with a distant contemplation, were now wide with terror. Each passing second felt like an eternity as Chol-Su scurried to retrieve a stretcher. Young Wook's agonizing groans haunted the air. "I can't move my legs." Peeling back his uniform revealed 2 grievous wounds, one of which had punctured his belly, threatening his spine. While we frantically worked to stabilize young Wook, Taeya remained petrified, lost in a daze of shock. I desperately sought his aid, but my pleas went unanswered. It was then that Sergeant Yi made a chilling decision, a moment that would forever be etched in our memories. He pulled Chol-Su aside, thrust a T-38 into his hands, and coldly instructed him to end young Wook's suffering. A gasp escaped my lips. While part of me acknowledged the stark realities of war, the larger part, the part that had laughed and trained with young Wook, was horrified. Chol-Su's voice quivered. "Sir, I can't." Yi's face, which usually bore an inscrutable expression, twisted with a volatile mix of frustration and fury. The tension in the air was palpable, every heartbeat echoing a question. What would come next? Amidst the surreal horrors unfolding before us, Sergeant Yi's impatience grew unbearable. He swiftly seized the pistol from Chol-Su's trembling grip and handed it to his brother, shouting that same dreadful command. I braced myself for resistance, for a spark of humanity, but was met with an eerie stillness. Chol-Su's focus shifted from his brother to an indistinct point in the distance. His expressionless stare made him appear more statue than man. For what felt like an eternity, he maintained that vacant gaze until finally he broke from the trance. His eyes, now seemingly more attuned to the reality around him, landed upon young Wook, gravely injured and vulnerable. The weight of the situation seemed to bend Chol-Su's posture as he hesitated for a split second. Then he uttered a chilling phrase, a token of surrender to authority. "If you say so, sir." No sooner had he spoken than he discharged 4 bullets straight into young Wook's heart. Chaos ensued. Yuan's screams of anguish pierced the air, while Chol-Su looked on, seemingly numb to the finality of his actions. His detachment was only broken when he handed the weapon back to the expectant Sergeant Yi. The surgeon's smile was haunting, a grotesque display of satisfaction for the loyalty shown. I rushed to comfort the distraught Yuan, my mind reeling from the brutality of the scene. All the while, Sergeant Yi's voice echoed with haunting clarity. "A soldier who cannot walk is a war that cannot be won." As we moved deeper into the woods, the orange hue of the sky made a brief appearance before being obscured by the looming tree canopy. Mortar streaks crisscrossed this mesmerizing canvas, a paradox of beauty and destruction. Under Sergeant Yi's stern command, we navigated the treacherous landscape. His justification for the move was a strategic decision to set up a defense against an anticipated American flank. Although internally seething, I bit back my words, focusing on the task at hand. Eventually, we were directed to halt and set up camp. Chol-Su and Yuan busied themselves with the meal preparations, while I and a few others were tasked with gathering firewood. Seizing this momentary reprieve, Yuan and I shared our disbelief, our minds grappling with the unprovoked violence we had just witnessed. The gravity of the situation was hard to ignore, especially with the very perpetrator in our midst, calmly going about his duties as if nothing had transpired. The memories of my tumultuous childhood came flooding back. The constant clash with my father, the emotional and physical scars. Pushing those thoughts aside, I found my voice, fueled by a mix of anger and desperation. Why did you do it? How could you? How could you turn on one of us? Chol-Su remained infuriatingly indifferent, answering in the same hollow tone. He told me to. The sheer simplicity of his justification left me reeling. An explosion echoed in the distance, further unnerving me. I don't care about Surgeon's orders. He was your friend. Caught up in my outburst, I barely registered Yuan's growing rage. His face was contorted with grief and anger. And before I could react, he had picked up a sizable rock, clearly intending to mete out his own form of justice. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and an overwhelming sense of dread before he wielded his harsh words against my mother. The heavy burden of choice lay on my shoulders, pressing me into the hard reality of the moment. The gun, the T-38, felt foreign yet familiar. I could feel its coldness seep through my hands, reminding me of the winter nights when my father's voice echoed through our home, chilling the warmth of our family's love. Yuan's story, his haunted eyes, and the visceral memory of his own past struggles with his father reverberated in my mind, creating a cacophony of emotions. How had we reached this point? How had the choices we made in our lives led us to this very moment, where the line between right and wrong was blurred? The embers of the fire pit crackled, and the warmth of the flames provided a stark contrast to the cold steel I held. It also juxtaposed the warmth of human empathy and understanding against the chill of violence and death. Each snap and pop of the wood served as a reminder of the fragility of life and how easily it could be extinguished. Around us, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the decision that loomed ahead. I felt as if I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, a single step away from changing the course of many lives, including my own. In the distance, the sounds of warfare had faded, replaced by the profound quietude of the forest, as if nature itself was pausing to witness the drama unfolding in its midst. The trees stood tall and silent, their leaves rustling softly in the gentle breeze, whispering ancient tales of love, loss, and redemption. As I wrestled with my thoughts, I pondered the true nature of power. Was it in the act of taking a life, or in the act of sparing one? The memories of my father's tyrannical reign over our household surged forth, reminding me of the countless times I had wished to stand up to him, to challenge his authority and break free from his oppressive grip. But here and now, the power was literally in my hands. Was this my chance to break free, to assert my own will? The eyes of my companions were upon me. Teo's gaze was inscrutable, his thoughts hidden behind a veil of stoicism. Yet, beneath that exterior, I sensed a tumult of emotions. Sergeant Tanhill's stern demeanor betrayed no emotion, but the weight of his expectations bore down on me. And then there was Yuan, his gaze filled with a myriad of emotions: fear, resignation, hope, and perhaps a plea for understanding. The moment stretched on, every heartbeat echoing like the deafening beat of war drums. The choices of the past, the consequences of the present, and the uncertainties of the future converged, leaving me at the crossroads of destiny, where I had to decide not just Yuan's fate, but also define who I truly was. The memories of my father's violent tendencies, the cruel acts he perpetrated against my mother and me, seemed to crash down upon me like a tidal wave as I looked upon Yuan. His visage was a living tapestry of anguish, one that mirrored the sum of my own painful recollections, the culmination of every torment, every bitter tear shed, every scream stifled. All converged into a singular moment of clarity. As I stared at the sergeant, the phantom image of my father overlaid him. It was as though I was once again a helpless child, witnessing the tyrannical reign of a monster. The words, "If you say so, sir," slipped from my lips, and without a second thought, I unleashed my years of pent-up rage. The ensuing silence was punctuated only by the dull thud of the rifle hitting the soft, damp earth. The juxtaposition of emotions that followed was almost surreal. The immense relief, almost exhilarating in its intensity, of having removed from this world what I perceived as a source of insufferable pain, quickly gave way to the sinking realization of the gravity of my actions. The weight of taking a life, especially one from my own side, bore down on me, sending me to my knees in despair. Tears, born from a mix of relief and regret, streamed down my face. Teo's voice, rich with a strange cadence, broke my trance. His words hinted at a deeper understanding of the human psyche and the complex morality of warfare. War was not just a straightforward act of killing the enemy. It was also a battle within, a confrontation with our inner demons, our fears, and our regrets. But as the fire's light played tricks on my vision, the very essence of Tao seemed to shift. What had once been familiar now took on a sinister form. His eyes, once full of empathy, now shone with an eerie malevolence. His once comforting smile had turned predatory, revealing sharp, menacing teeth. As Tao's visage transformed, Yuan's reaction was immediate and heart-wrenching. The weight of his past, combined with the horror unfolding before him, led him to seek escape in the most tragic of ways. The aftermath was eerily silent, the only reminder of the traumatic events being Yuan's lifeless body next to those of our comrades. Dawn's first light painted the horizon, and amidst the horrors of war, a lone leaf, vibrant and full of life, danced its way to the dying embers of our fire. The juxtaposition of life and death, of beauty amidst chaos, was not lost on me. I abandoned the battleground, leaving behind not just the physical reminders of that fateful night, but also a part of my soul. The journey back to civilization was a blur, with the boundaries between reality and nightmare constantly blurring. The Korean Peninsula, my homeland, had been a battleground for me in more ways than one. The scars of that one day in war were indelibly etched into my psyche, but they paled in comparison to the lifelong battle I waged within, struggling against the traumas of my past. While I might not wear the accolades of a war hero, my inner battles were no less valiant. The war within me, against my past, my fears and my regrets, raged on. And just like the haunting melody of a song, it played on, serving as a somber backdrop to the story of my life.